guys, it's 8th Deadly Sin here again with another Champion Select analysis for the day 1 of the first week of the European LCS. This game is the Splice versus Unicorns of Love game, Splice being on the blue side, Unicorns of Love being on the red side. Now let's jump straight in to bans. Now the first ban coming out from Splice is Trundle, and finally, for the love of God, someone ban Trundle. Now, Trundle, as if you've watched any of my other videos, is a very strong pick right now. The ability to steal stats even through the 6.1 nerfs, the zoning and control of the Pillar of Ice, not only disengage and set up engages, confirm that poke will be landed with the slow of the ice pillar, along with the ability to fragment and create zones throughout team fights, as well as just general zone control with those abilities, and the stat stealing ability of his ultimate makes him pretty much one of the strongest supports out there this patch, as well as a strong flex pick, as he still can be ran in the top lane or the jungle if you wanted. Less common, but still possible. Let's move on to the next ban. Next ban coming out from Unicorns of Love, another pretty much red side insta ban that we've seen throughout this entire day today in the European LCS is going to be Gangplank. Gangplank, as I said, huge amount of area of effect, physical damage, a lot of damage coming out, especially if he crit barrels and has a nice chain of barrels in a row. Also the global pressure of his ult, as well as just the pure kind of armor penetration and damage output that Gangplank can put on the top lane, and the wave clear that he provides pretty much makes him an insta-ban coming from the red side, not wanting to give that pick up. Let's move on to the next ban. The next ban is going to be Kindred coming out from Splice. What we have here is just another classic tier 1 ban. Obviously, if you're not going to pick Kindred, it's safe enough to get it away. The Kindred ult is probably the best utility out of any jungler coming right now. The ability to put a pause on any engage or team fight, make yourself invulnerable if you're about to die, still chunk out healthier members on the enemy team, and then get healed up at the end of it, allowing for a nice chunk of burst damage to be able to finish off anyone on the enemy team who's almost dead on that side of the map, is just one of the few reasons, and many reasons, especially with the increased AD scaling with the passive of Kindred, necessitates the ban. Good ban coming out from Splice. The next ban is going to be Lissandra coming out from Unicorns of Love. Visasachi is not known for his Lissandra play, and is again another tier 1 top flex pick ban. While it mainly goes top, still can be played mid. LCK and the tournament so far, or I should say LCS instead of tournament, at this point has shown that Lissandra has been very popular, whether it's been picking or banning this champion, just providing a lot of not only zone control with the ultimate and various forms of CC that she has, as well as just a large amount of AoE magic damage and burst potential, as well as lockdown potential with the CC point and click of her ult, as well as the CC ring that she can put around herself if she queues into the team. And she brings some tanky stats to her as well. You can put a roll on her, have great scaling into the late game, still have a huge amount of damage. Necessitates a ban. Good ban if you're not going to be picking it right away. Let's move on to the 5th and final ban for Splice. The final ban is going to be Shen. Might seem a bit weird, but coming off the game of H2K and Odo Omni on Shen, we can definitely see both his defensive and offensive capabilities. Again, I much probably would have preferred a Tahm Kench ban here or a Fiora ban here, just because I think they're stronger top lanes. I think you can play around the Shen and the Shen ulti. I don't really think it necessitates a ban from Splice, and I really don't see what team comp that Shen would necessarily be a direct counter to, especially with how Splice ended up picking its lineup, which I'll get into. I really don't think Shen was a necessary ban. Not terrible in the sense that Shen is still pretty good, provides a lot of frontline tankiness. I just think Tahm Kench or a Fiora ban definitely would have been better, considering what we've seen in the LCK and LPL regions, as well as the previous games to this point of the LCS, that those are much more popular. Let's go to the final ban. Coming out from Unicorns of Love, that is going to be Lulu. Again, another classic tier 1 ban that you do not want to give up as a first pick, especially when you're on red side. Lulu just has insane damage, especially since the games are so short. It allows her strengths to really be exemplified, while her fall off period in the late game really never happens with the length of the games and how long they actually are. The ability to buff up any member of the team, just taking that away takes out a lot of team comps that would revolve around single target buffing, as well as just damage and control that Lulu can execute, especially with Thunderlords now and that burst potential in the mid lane or top lane, wherever she decides to go. Safe ban. Let's get into pick phases. So we have Splice coming out with the first pick, insta-locking that Rise. Again, I can kind of see why the European teams are leaving Rise open. Because Rise is kind of that bait pick. I almost feel like Unicorns to Love is baiting Splice to pick Rise. Because Rise really seems like it's first pick ready. Like it's just insane in the late game. Just so much area of effect damage, so much scaling, can become tanky, can make all these plays. It seems just like such a good pick that really can't be countered too much. But we can see if you're not a master of Rise mechanics in the early to mid game, your Rise play is pretty underwhelming because you're never going to reach the point of late game damage because you're never going to get to that point, never going to be able to scale up to that point. You're just not going to have the items and the stats to be the late game beast that you think Rise is. So I feel like Unicorns of Love did a good thing leaving Rise open in the fact that it kind of baits Splice into that first pick. While Rise is still a flex pick in that it can go top or mid, uh, it pretty much has to go mid because Rise really needs to farm up and get a lot of gold in the long lane of mid. Pretty much means he would have to use his teleport every time to get back to lane, making him pretty much ineffectual to have any map presence, and he wouldn't have any map presence at all in the top lane anyways because he wouldn't be at the point where he could do enough damage necessarily to be a huge TP threat if there is a team fight going on. Now that's enough about Rise. We can get into that when we analyze the team comps. Let's go to the second pick phase. Second pick phase, first pick phase for Unicorns of Love, they pick up Tom Kench and Alistar. So while Tom Kench is a really good flex pick, pretty much eliminated any question of where he's going while also picking Alistar up in the first rotation. Alistar, still a really, really good support, kind of being overshadowed by the likes of Trundle and Poppy, who just kind of provide the same engage as Alistar, but with just a little bit more damage and a little more utility than just a pure stun bot. So Alistar, just as you know, his ult provides a pretty much really big tank boost, allowing him to set up dives and tank those towers, as well as the headbutt pulverize to get nice angles on stun and position himself in such a way that he can knock enemies back, as well as being able to gap close and get those stuns off, making him a very effective support and, excuse me, a very safe first pick for a support when you're blind picking at this point and you want to reserve your other positions and isolate your other positions to possibly counterpick depending on what Splice is going to be going for because they only have Rise on the board right now. Now, top lane Kench, very strong. Like I said, pretty much becomes unkillable. All Kench has to do is build tank. Don't build like a Bloodthirster or anything that you've seen in Bronze 5 that's like he's doing so much damage, he's doing so good. No, as any professional knows or any decent league player knows, you just build straight tank on Kench, and essentially you're equivalent to two front lines with the gray health shield that you have. So at a certain point in the game, if Tom Kench is played and executed correctly, not only is he unkillable, but he has massive map pressure that Rise never will be able to have, not only because of the mobility and low cast time of his ult and his ability to take people with that, but also the TP gives him another layer of mobility and global map pressure, and then the ability to lock people down with the Devour and the stun coming off from the 3 passive procs to a Q to possibly get some of that basic CC if that's set up correctly, but also the ability to save teammates and transport people around the map really makes Tom Kench one of the top lane picks to be choosing, especially even if Rise is going in the top lane. Tom Kench can just sit there, farm, and tank up and become unkillable regardless of who he's playing against. So very good first drafting phase coming from Unicorns of Love. Let's go to the third drafting phase that's coming out from Splice. They're going to be picking up Poppy and Lucian. So pretty much you can assume that they're going to be picking up their bot lane here, seeing how Poppy, even though could flex to jungle, but very, very, very unlikely, could flex top, which is even still probably just as likely, if not a smidge less, because Rise is on the board. we can see Poppy's going to be going support, offers that a lot of that engage, offers some of the CC with getting people in the walls, offers some nice slow with the Q, which isn't too bad, but she is melee, offers some nice poke with the buckler toss as her passive, a lot of disengage potential with the ulti to be able to knock multiple people away, completely disengage any dives or ganks that are going to be happening, the ability for her to knock any stuns or dashes away, meaning she's going to be able to counter a headbutt with Alistar from Alistar instantly with that ability. A good nice counter to that engage potential from Alistar. So I think it's a very good pickup in that context as support. Now moving on to Lucian, seeing how they're going to be blind picking their ADC, I think either Lucian or Corki would be the safest bet. I think Lucian is probably even a safer bet in the sense that Lucian pretty much is lane dominant against any ADC he's going to be going against, especially if he's coupled with a very aggressive support and heavy engage focused support like a Poppy. They're going to be able to bully almost any lane that they get. We're going to have immense damage coming out and poke coming out from the Lucian with the piercing lights and such, as well as the wave clear from piercing light and culling. He's going to be able to push in those waves and put immense pressure on whatever bot lane he's in, especially with the synergy that he has with the all-inness of a Poppy support. Now let's move on to the fourth drafting phase, which is going to be Unicorn of Love's second. They're going to be picking up Elise for Diamond procs, and they're going to be picking up Steelback Ezreal. Now, the Ezreal might come as a bit of surprise. It was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought, well, if they left Corki open, if you feel comfortable on Corki, Corki essentially handles the same aspects as Ezreal that even, the regular Ezreal does. He has the poke and magic damage poke, as well as, some decent physical and mixed damage coming out, just as Ezreal does. The poke is pretty much the same. That range is pretty much the same with the rockets you can spam out. And the one thing that Ezreal doesn't have is the package, and I think the package is just such a versatile tool. I would have much rather seen a Corki come out for Steelback, but ultimately Ezreal isn't that bad either because he can poke and kite the Poppy, especially if he goes blue build. The Poppy's never going to be able to engage upon him, and if he goes blue build poke, he's going to be able to do massive damage to Lucian while getting different angles that Lucian cannot accomplish with his Q, because it has to be based off a minion or another champion base to create a very linear path that it travels from. So I guess Ezreal offers a lot more mobility and kite than a Corki would. So I think Ezreal is a pretty decent pick. I still would have picked up the Corki because no one on the team comp so far that Splice has been constructing really is going to be able to engage on the Corki, especially if he has Valkyrie up. And the package, I think, is a really versatile engage tool that is a lot better than, say, an Arcane Shift or an ult coming out from Ezreal. Now, the Elise is, I think, a very decent blind pick of a jungler. Obviously, Kindred's been eliminated, but I think Elise has a lot of unique gank paths. I think she does a lot of, mixed magic damage, not mixed damage, magic damage, a lot of percent health damage, making her a nice viable pick in the jungle. She has a lot of CC with the long range of the cocoon, as well as the ability to gank from various points of the fog of war with the vision changes, allowing her to get multiple gank paths off with the repel and the range of the cocoon. Me personally, I probably would have selected more of a Zac as a jungler because I think Zac has even greater gank paths because of just the sheer range of the slingshot, as well as nice amounts of damage and even a more of a tank factor, especially with his passive. I think it would have been just as good, but also I understand why the Elise choice was picked over the Zac, and I guess in the end I kind of lean towards more Elise because Elise provides more damage than Zac and a lot of more counter jungling ability than a Zac would. So Diamond Prox can be in Trashy's jungle constantly, counter jungling and disrupting and finding those paths that he's taking, getting vision and such. So it would be a good choice for him in the end. Moving on to the fifth pick phase, we're going to be picking up the Varus, which is going to be going mid lane, and the Rek'Sai, which is going to be Splice's jungler. Now, the Varus mid is probably the most interesting and I think kind of fatal flaw that Splice is having in their team comp. Because up to this point, Lucian has some nice, zones of damage he can create with the linearity of his Q and his ult, as well as the amount of damage that do. But he's very engage focused. He ease in, ease around, and gets his passive procs and does a lot of damage. Poppy, very engage focused, is willing to jump right in the fight, block those dashes both in and out of the area she's going into, and with that movement speed she gets, she is able to be able to create those engages and kind of initiate those team fights. Rise himself is going to be, able to run in, get the rune prisons, and at that point where he can be able to get multiple spell rotations off, is almost going to be able to stun lock anyone he encounters and just deal massive amounts of damage. So where does this Varus really fit in? I mean, I see that it has a lot of poke, but even for poke, there's better poke options. I'll get into this when I analyze both team comps at the end once I get through the rest of the picks. The Rek'Sai, another tier 1 jungler, pretty much the only thing you would select. Again, I would have chose Zac more because I think Zac really accomplishes what Rek'Sai is trying to do at a greater rate, because I think Zac just has greater gank ability in the sense that he can choose so many more different angles from the fog with the vision changes and the less amount of green wards that are on the map just because they're no longer available, and the pure range of his slingshot. I think Zac would have been a way better choice. I'll get into that when I talk about the team comps, but Rek'Sai itself herself is still, very good in the sense that it's tier 1, but I think Zac is stronger right now in the current patch, would have been a better choice. Now moving on to the last pick of the game, it's going to be Zed for Fox in the mid lane, and now what everyone might be thinking is like, well, if we kind of assume that Varus is going mid, why would you choose, a melee into a range matchup or something like that? The key thing about Zed is that he has the nice gap close with the shadow as well as a massive amounts of damage, but he's a very not dive orientated, but a very all-in assassin type. The nice thing about choosing him against Varus, why originally it would sound, wow, you're going up against a caster, a caster mid. Why would you choose, Zed, who's going to be melee and not going to be able to necessarily farm the best or something like that? The thing about Varus is Varus has no gap close or escapes, meaning that Varus is going to have to almost be playing at max range in this mid lane, because if he gets any close to Zed, Zed can all in him and just do massive amounts of damage, and uh, Varus has no way to counter that engage, whereas Zed has an ability to get out of potential ganks, so he has no problem pushing up this lane, applying massive amounts of pressure on the mid lane, as well as, since Diamond Prox is going to be on Unleash, who has a nice, gank ability with a repel and the range of the cocoon, the gank pressure just purely from Zed in the combination of Diamond Prox, or even the visage of Diamond Prox being in the distance, potentially being there to gank, is going to force this Varus to be in the backline. A very good, assassin type mid lane, really rounds out the comp and provides a lot more damage for Unicorn's Love, which is kind of what they're lacking at this point in the draft as their final pick. Also, it's good to counter the Rise, because even if Rise does go mid, which would be very strange in the sense of sending Varus top, it would be in the fact that, Zed can apply enough early kill pressure on the Rise to potentially set him behind and make him ineffectual in the entire game. So I think that this is a very good lineup to choose from, and now let's kind of analyze the team comps. Now, Splice coming out of here, now this is where I get kind of confused of what their team comp is. So they have a bit of zone in the sense that you have a Rek'Sai who can kind of create a little zone of pressure if he has tunnels up, and then the AoE that he applies. You have some zoning coming out from Rise, but it's not too much. It's really based on where Rise is rather than an actual zone of pressure that it can exert. You have the engage that both Rek'Sai and Poppy can have, so you have some engage factors there. You really have some wave clear coming out from both Kobe and Lucian on these picks right here, but I mean, ultimately that wave clear would have been handled by any other, people with decent abilities and area of effect on their champions anyways, meaning that they're really a mix of three comps. They're, even if we eliminate the zone, they're really just kind of the combination of something trying to be a poke comp, including Varus, who is the odd man out, and then someone trying to be like a engage slash control zone team that's ultimately trying to get Rise to the late game. Because this Varus, unless some amazing ganks come out from Trashy, is really going to be far behind and is really out of place in this team comp, because the poke, there's better poke control mages that you could have chose instead of Varus necessarily coming out with the AD. I feel like they have a lot of AD on their team. They could have went double AP with the Rise top. I think that would have been perfectly fine. I would have preferred to see maybe like a LeBlanc coming out. I see that he blind picked it, but why would you blind pick a Varus, someone who has no inherent mobility or gap closes? The only thing that he has to save him is the ult, but that's ultimately going to have to be used as an engage tool to even get any kills off. So I feel like Splice's team comp is trying to do too much with too little, and ultimately the Varus is that fatal, thorn in its side, in the sense that it is squishy. It doesn't really provide that much. They have enough tank on their team that they can't just get snowballed over, but I think if the Rise is completely eliminated in the early game and becomes ineffectual, there's no way they're going to be able to sustain a team long enough to hold and, counter siege enough to be able to get Rise to that late game, especially with Rise going top lane because of the Varus means he's going to have a longer lane, not going to be able to ramp up as fast as a mid lane Rise would do, and he's not going to have any global pressure that a normal top lane like Fisichachi on Tom Kench is going to have. Now let's get to Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love is kind of perfecting the team comp that has been evolving in this um, meta is 6.1. It's pretty much you have a really tanky or at least a decently tanky front line, which has been standard for many seasons now, but it's also a highly mobile tank line. You're going to have Engage coming in from Alistar, which can be countered by Poppy, so probably not the best, but still good at seeing how when they picked it in the draft. The mobility and tankiness of Tom Kench essentially counts for two frontliners because of the shield health, giving them massive, ability to engage as well as get around the map and save people. You have Steelback on Ezreal, which isn't the best, but still provides a decent amount of poke damage and a lot of damage in these team fights, especially if he goes blue build. He's going to be able to kite out any member trying to get onto him, trying to eliminate him. He's going to be able to kite out the Rise, kite out the Poppy, kite out the Rek'Sai. And Varus isn't going to be able to hit him with any of that poke, and Lucian probably isn't going to be able to get close enough to him until they go through all of the frontline damage and tankiness that Unicorns Love have. The Elise gives them a lot of gank ability in the sense that he can go all around the map. I think ganking top lane would be specifically good in this matchup just to shut down the Rise, and once you take care of the Rise, you can focus more mid lane, and once you get mid lane going, that's pretty much GG at that point, with the Rise shut down in conjunction with a fed Zed, and I think the Zed fits perfectly into here because it just provides that amount of assassination, kind of bursty damage that they need in this team to really kind of round out the rough edges. Anyone else being selected, I don't think would have provided enough damage. I think Zed, especially with his passive, provides enough damage even if he gets behind to still put a nice threat onto Unicorns of Love, and I think there's abilities that can allow them to disengage effectively if Zed gets, really deep, tries to assassinate, gets out, can be eaten by Tom Kench, they can run away. They have enough peel and poke with Zed Qs coming out, especially Shadow ones, as real Qs coming out and poking. I think their team comp really provides, if I had to summarize of what it is, it's not it's more of a kite slash poke team comp, but not in the sense of a traditional poke team comp, such as like the Varus strats that were coming out in season 5, but more of a poke slash engage. It's just going to whittle you down to the point that they can all in, but they're also not afraid of team fighting just because of the fear frontline and engage potential that they have. So I think the Zed is a perfect pick. If they would have went with something like a Victor or an Orianna, I think that would have been a completely wrong choice. Would have been completely out of place. They wouldn't have had enough damage. It would have allowed the Rise to get up. I think they have a team comp that is good enough in that early to mid game, which is becoming the crucial moment in all these 6.1 and season 6 games. The ability to shut down the Rise, shut down the Varus, and essentially be able to not only have a lot of macro rotations. I think they're going to be able to take towers well if they be able and control their macro game well if they're able to rotate to various towers and put it out, because the counter siege, while they have wave clear, their members are just pretty squishy and otherwise can't really reach the members of Unicorn of Love on Splice's side to end that siege. And I think the split push potential with the Zed is still there, which is amazing, as well as just the general mobility of these champions. I think I would give the edge to Unicorns of Love. I have not watched the VOD of this, so I don't know what happens. Tell me how it spans out. Tell me if my analysis are right or wrong in the comments. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.